The smell of stale coffee and grief still clung to the air in my little house days after John's funeral. Maple Creek, a town that once felt like a warm hug, now pressed down on me, heavy and cold. I tried to focus, to just clean, to put things back, as if tidiness could mend anything. I was sifting through John's desk, touching his favorite fountain pen, a half-finished crossword puzzle. Little bits of him. My chest ached, a deep, hollow kind of ache. It wasn't just the grief anymore, though. There was this unsettling feeling, like static electricity just under my skin, ever since the accident. His car. That's what they said. He lost control on Miller's Bend. A winding road, yes, but John was a careful driver, always had been. No one could explain why he lost control, just gone. And some whispers I knew, about me, about how I'd been stressed, how maybe I'd said something, done something. The police had asked a lot of questions, too many, I thought. But what could I say? My memories of that night were patchy. A fight, yes, a silly, stupid fight. Then nothing clear until the phone rang, my world shattering. I picked up a framed photo from his desk. John and me at our engagement party. His arm around my waist, that easy, wide grin of his. God, I missed it. I missed him. My thumb traced the glass. Beneath the frame, almost hidden by a stack of old bills, was his house key. Heavy, cold metal. I knew it, every curve, every tiny scratch. There was one particular deep gouge near the head from when he'd tried to jimmy open a stubborn lock years ago. A small, endearing clumsiness of his that had always made me smile. I picked it up. It felt familiar, solid in my palm. My eyes, still blurry from unshed tears, scanned the desk again. And then I froze. Another key. Identical. Lying right on the polished oak. Same size, same shape. Same distinctive deep gouge near the head. Exactly the same. For a second, I thought I'd put it down without realizing that my mind was just playing games. My hands felt clumsy. Maybe I hadn't even realized I'd picked it up the first time. I opened my hand. The key was still there, warm from my touch. I looked at the desk. The other key was still there too, cold, untouched. My breath hitched. No, wait, this was just... I must have forgotten. Maybe he had a spare. Of course, he had spares. Everyone had spares, right? But not like this. Not identical. Not with the same unique scratch. His key was unique. It was his. I pushed the thought away hard. Just grief. Just exhaustion. Your mind plays tricks when you're tired. I gathered both keys, shoved them into a small velvet box where I kept other mementos of John. Out of sight, out of mind. Probably just an old spare, yes, or I really was losing it. I forced a laugh, a dry, grating sound that barely made it past my throat. I needed to talk to someone. Mom. She would understand. She always did. I picked up my phone, my fingers fumbling. The dialing tone seemed to stretch on forever, a hollow sound in the quiet house. Hello? Her voice snapped through the receiver, sharper than usual. Mom, it's me, Sarah. A pause. Oh, Sarah, what is it? I'm busy. Busy? My own mother? I felt a pang. I just wanted to talk about everything. It's been hard. The funeral, all the questions. Yes, well, life goes on, doesn't it? Her tone was flat, not even a trace of her usual warmth. You need to pull yourself together, dear, and tell those children of yours to keep it down, will you? I could hear them from here. Children? I frowned. Mom, what children? I'm alone here, and you're calling from your place, miles away. Another pause, colder this time.
Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. I just heard them. Little giggles. They're probably disturbing David next door again. You know how particular he is about his afternoon nap. David, our neighbor, he'd never, not once, complained about noise. He loves kids, actually. And I had no kids. No one had been here since the funeral reception, and even then, no kids. My voice thin. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "There are no children here, and David, he never complains." "Sarah, for goodness sakes, you're not making sense," she sighed, impatient now. "Just handle it. I have to go." And then a click. She hung up. No, I love you. No, take care. Just hung up. My hand slowly lowered the phone. My mom. Something wasn't right. This wasn't her.
But then, I thought, maybe she's just stressed out too. We've all been through a lot. That was the logical explanation. My mom was always sensible. She must be just burnt out. Later that evening, after the last rays of sun had faded, leaving the room a dim gray, I found myself in my studio. It was the only place I felt truly myself, surrounded by canvases, tubes of paint, the familiar smell of linseed oil. I grabbed a brush, my favorite one, made of soft sable. I wanted to paint, to lose myself in the colors, to forget just for a moment everything that had happened. But as my fingers closed around the wooden handle, it felt wrong. Not smooth and cool as it always was. It was coarse, almost sandy, like fine grit was embedded in the wood itself. I rubbed my thumb over it, then again. The feeling persisted. I shook my head. Must be some dust. I'd ignored the studio too long. My mind was making things up. I tried to paint, but my hand hovered over the canvas. My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I felt it then, a coldness, a slight stickiness, like a thin spider web just brushed against the back of my neck, then lingered. Maybe it was just my own hair. I reached back, brushed my hand over my skin. Nothing. But the sensation stayed. A phantom touch, icy and vaguely unclean. And then a faint smell, something acrid, like burnt sugar or maybe something chemical. From where? I sniffed the air. No, it was just there, faint but persistent. I looked at the framed photo of John and me again, sitting on the corner of my drafting table. His face still so vibrant. The acrid smell seemed stronger near it. My hand reached for it, and as I touched the glass, I felt a strange warmth, almost a low heat, radiating from the picture frame itself. What the hell? Desperate for a distraction, for something familiar and comforting, I picked up my tablet. I scrolled through old videos, landing on the footage from our engagement party. Bright lights, happy faces, laughter. John, looking dashing in his suit, got down on one knee. "Sarah, my love," he said, his voice clear and full of joy, "will you marry me?" I remembered that moment so perfectly. The gasp I made, the tears stinging my eyes, the overwhelming happiness. And then I heard it, a different voice, right after John's proposal. Clear, precise. "Chị Sarah nhìn John cứ như John là kẻ may mắn duy nhất vậy. Em thì thấy có gì đó hơi lạ." My blood ran cold. That was Mary, my cousin, my closest friend. Her voice. But those words, I'd never, ever heard her say that. Not then, not ever. It wasn't in the video. It couldn't be. That moment was pure joy, unmarred. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. That voice, her words, they were clear as a bell, yet completely alien to my memory of that day. It was like a parasite, a thought, burrowing its way into my happiest memory, twisting it. No,
I whispered, my voice barely audible. No, that didn't happen. I tried to rewind, to hear it again. The video flickered. The image on the screen glitched, pixelated for a split second. And then there was Mary. Her face, much closer to the camera than it had been a moment ago, the background blurring. Her smile was wide, but not warm. It was knowing, almost predatory. And her eyes, usually bright with mischief, seemed to hold a dull, unsettling glint. It disappeared as quickly as it appeared, the video resuming its normal, cheerful pace, as if nothing had changed. I slammed the tablet shut. My heart was galloping now, a wild thing trapped in my chest. What was happening? Was I cracking up? Was the grief finally making me hallucinate? I tried to call my best friend, Lisa. Her phone rang several times before she picked up, her voice curt. Sarah, what do you want? It's late. Sarah, I need to talk to you. Something weird is happening. I just watched the engagement video, and Mary's voice, it said something horrible, something that wasn't there before. And my mom acted so strange earlier, about kids that aren't here, and the keys. There were 2 identical keys, and this brush, it feels gritty. And that smell? I rambled, desperate, practically breathless. There was a long silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh from Lisa. Sarah, you're upset. We all are. It was an accident. John's gone. That's the truth. You need to accept it. And about Mary, she said what she said. You heard it. We all heard it. And your mom, she just worries about you.
No, you don't understand. Mary never said that. I remember. I know. I screamed into the phone, tears finally breaking free and streaming down my face. Sarah, please, you're scaring me. You're not well. Maybe you should see someone, a professional. Her voice wasn't just annoyed anymore. It was laced with a chilling fear. Not fear for me, but fear of me. Lisa, please, you have to believe me. Another sigh. I can't do this right now, Sarah. I really can't. I'm sorry. And then another click. She hung up. Just like my mom. No goodbyes, no comfort, just dismissal. And that cold fear in her voice. They all thought I was crazy. They all saw a different reality. But I knew. I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. I wasn't making it up. I couldn't be. The only person who had even listened, really listened, was Jake. Jake Miller, a private detective I'd been vaguely referred to by John's cousin, who'd mentioned that Jake sometimes took on unusual cases. I'd called him a few days ago, just a general inquiry about John's accident, about wanting a second pair of eyes on the police report. I hadn't even mentioned any of this other stuff yet. He'd seemed patient, not dismissive. I needed to meet him. I needed to tell him everything, not just about John's accident, but about the keys, the smell, the video, my mom, Lisa, everything. He was my last hope, my only hope. The house had grown darker now, though it was still early afternoon, an oppressive, heavy darkness that felt wrong, as if the light itself was struggling to penetrate the air. I walked into the living room, feeling my way to the light switch. My hand trembled as I flicked it up. Instead of the room brightening, a deeper, colder shadow seemed to descend. The corners of the room stretched, inky and impenetrable. It felt like the light had sucked everything else out of the space, leaving a void. My heart hammered. This wasn't how lights worked. This wasn't how anything worked. I flicked it down. The darkness lightened, but not to the familiar, comforting glow of a fading day. Instead, a sickly, pale blue light seeped in through the windows, casting sharp, unnatural edges on the furniture.
My trusted armchair looked like a predatory beast, its shadows long and distorted. The framed pictures on the wall looked like strangers, their faces drawn and gaunt. Everything became alien, foreign. I stared at the room, my breath catching in my throat. Every tiny attempt I made to control my surroundings, to bring back some semblance of normalcy, was not just thwarted, but twisted against me. Even the light, the most basic, predictable thing, had abandoned its rules. An intense wave of loneliness washed over me, colder than any draft. I felt utterly, completely alone. And then a new kind of fear bloomed, sharper than the grief, a fear of the unknown, of the impossible. My eyes fell on John's photo again, the one from our engagement party. I walked to it, my legs feeling heavy, like I was moving through thick mud. I picked it up, cradling it in my hands. His face, that good, kind face. I found a fleeting comfort in it, a warmth that pushed back against the cold invading the house. But then, as I looked closer, his eyes in the photo seemed different. Not the same sparkling eyes I remembered. They seemed distant, observing, almost accusatory. I placed the photo back on the mantelpiece, facing me. My gaze lingered for a moment. Then I turned, my shoulders hunched, walking deeper into the living room, trying to escape the chill, the creeping feeling of wrongness. A soft scraping sound. I spun around. The framed photo was no longer facing me. It had somehow pivoted, turning towards the big bay window. The pale blue light from outside, that strange phosphorescent glow, now illuminated John's face from the side. His eyes, fixed on the window, seemed to stare out into the deepening gloom. Cold and empty. My breath hitched. No, it couldn't have. It was just gravity. The frame was probably loose. I was just imagining things. I took a shaky step closer. My hand reached out, trembling, to touch the frame. But as my fingers made contact with the photo itself, with John's smiling face in the picture, it wasn't the smooth, cool feel of photographic paper. It was splotchy, squeezable, like a piece of wrinkled, dry leather. And my fingertips felt a dampness, strangely warm, almost sticky. Not water, something else.
A raw scream tore through my throat, but it made no sound. My hand recoiled as if burned, pushing the frame. It clattered to the floor, bouncing once, twice, the glass intact but the wood rattling. And as it settled, face up on the worn rug, John's eyes moved. They moved, slowly, deliberately, not a trick of the light. They shifted from the window to a dark corner of the room, then to me. His gaze, it burned into me, utterly, completely devoid of warmth. Cold, assessing, like something alien was peering through those familiar sockets. A scream finally escaped my lips, shrill and ragged. Pure, unadulterated terror. I scrambled back, away from the photo, away from the house, away from the impossible. My legs propelled me forward, blindly, towards the door, out of the living room, through the hall, out into the biting evening air. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, but I had to get out, get away. I fumbled for my car keys, jammed them into the ignition. The engine groaned, then roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel, and sped down the driveway, not daring to look back at the house that was no longer home. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging, mixing with the cold sweat. The streets of Maple Creek blurred past me. Every familiar house now seeming to loom, every shadow reaching.
A desperate, heavy ache filled my chest. Not just grief for John, but this new pain, this absolute, devastating fear. I was not just alone. I was being hunted by something I couldn't even grasp. I drove aimlessly, the dark road unfolding before me, the only certainty being that I wouldn't go back. I was lost, completely, utterly lost. I must have driven for hours, until the exhaustion finally caught up with me. I pulled over onto a deserted shoulder of a country road, somewhere I didn't recognize. The car engine ticked as it cooled. I slumped against the window, the cold glass pressing against my cheek, and drifted into a restless, fitful sleep. Suddenly, my phone blared like an alarm, startling me awake. My heart leaped into my throat. The screen glowed, a harsh beacon in the dark car, an unknown number. I fumbled with it, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was a message, just one photo. It was my studio, the room I had fled hours ago. My drafting table, my easel, my paints, all perfectly visible. But there, right in the center of the frame, was the key, my sable paintbrush, the one that felt gritty. It was lying deliberately, carefully, across the framed photo of John. Not the one from the mantelpiece. This was the one from the engagement party. John's eyes, which had been distant, almost accusatory earlier, were now open, wide, and staring straight into the camera, into my soul. And his lips, they were pulled into a smile I had never, ever seen on his face, wide and thin, stretched and ghastly, a mockery of his usual loving grin. And below the photo, a single line of text, "I miss you." My phone showed the time, 2:45 a.m. My whole body began to shake uncontrollably. It wasn't just the violation, the gut-wrenching realization that someone had been in my house, in my sanctuary, after I'd fled. No, it was the photo itself, the brush, the smile, and the message. John, he had sent it. But how? And why did he look like that? Why wasn't his face cold? Why was his smile so wrong? And if he was gone, who was missing me? The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the worn car mat. "I miss you." The words echoed in my head, not John's voice, but something metallic, stretched. That picture, his ghastly smile. The paintbrush laid so deliberately across his photo, as if someone, or something, was leaving me a message. A sick, twisted joke. But who, and how? Who knew where I'd put that brush? Who had been in my house? My breath hitched, tiny, wet sounds in the chilly darkness of the car. The horror that had chased me from my home was no longer a vague phantom. It was real. It was there. It was watching. And it was playing games. Games with John's face. I pulled myself upright, my muscles screaming, my whole body stiff, cold, and shaking. I had to see Jake now. He was the only one who had seemed to listen, truly listen, without judgment, without that fear in his eyes. Maybe, he hoped.
God, I hoped. I drove again, the early morning light beginning to paint the sky in bruised purples and grays. I found a gas station that was just opening, fueled up, bought a terrible coffee, and called Jake. My voice was a shaky whisper. "Sarah?" He sounded surprised, then concerned. Are you all right? I've been trying to reach you. Your phone went straight to voicemail. I... I'm fine, I think. Jake, I need to see you, now. There's more, so much more. It's worse than I thought. He didn't hesitate. Where are you? I'll come to you. No, I said, looking out at the waking world, none of which seemed real. I'm on my way back to Maple Creek. Meet me at the library, the old one. I have a hunch about something, and I need to tell you everything. He agreed. His steady voice, even over the phone, felt like a small, worn comfort, a thin thread of sanity in a world that was unwinding. When I pulled up to the Maple Creek Public Library, the sun was fully up, casting long, cheerful shadows. It felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. Jake's old sedan was already parked. He stood by the entrance, a tall, solid figure, hands in his pockets, looking out at the street. When he saw me, he offered a small, tired smile. "Sarah," he said, his eyes scanning my face, "you look like you haven't slept in a week." "I haven't," I admitted, my voice raw. "Not really. Not since—" I trailed off. "Since John died. Since the keys. Since everything. Come inside. I'll tell you." Inside, the library was quiet, a hushed sanctuary of old books and dust motes dancing in the sunlight filtered through high windows. We found a quiet corner near the local history section. I started talking about the keys, the acrid smell, the gritty brush, my mom's strange call, Lisa's chilling dismissal. I recounted the horror of the moving photo, the stretching face, the feeling like dry leather. And then the text, the photo of John's grotesque smile. Jake listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't roll his eyes, didn't try to rationalize it away. He just listened. His brow furrowed sometimes, his jaw tightened, but he listened. When I finished, the silence in the library felt heavy around us. "So," he finally said, his voice low, "you think someone broke into your house, messed with your things, and sent you that photo? Trying to... what exactly?" "No," I whispered. "I don't think it was someone. Not a person. I think it's whatever is doing all this. It's what changed my mom, what made Lisa scared, what made John's photo move." I paused, taking a shaky breath. "And the message, 'I miss you.' It was from John's number. But it wasn't him. It couldn't be him." Jake rubbed his chin, deep in thought. "Okay, this complicates things. If it's not a person, then we're looking at something else. But we start with what we know. You mentioned a hunch about this library. What were you thinking?" "John," I said, focusing on the small, tangible task, trying to push away the overwhelming dread. He loved history, especially Maple Creek's history. He spent a lot of time in here, and he was always talking about some old, forgotten stuff. Maybe he found something that could explain any of this. We spent hours sifting through dusty archives, old town records, faded newspapers, local folklore books. The librarian, a kind old woman named Mrs. Dubois, gave us access to the more obscure sections, used to John's presence, now a ghost in these halls. She gave us a sad, sympathetic look, probably thinking I was spiraling. I was focused on a large, intricately drawn map of Maple Creek from the early 1900s, displayed under a glass case. It showed the original layout of the town, surrounding forests, rivers, and undeveloped land. John had always loved topographical maps, how they showed the land, the bones of a place. I traced a finger over the smooth glass, following the winding path of Miller's Bend, where John's car had crashed. "Look," I said to Jake, pointing to a sprawling section of woodland marked Willow Creek Forest near the bend. "This path here,
John and I used to hike it all the time. He called it the Emerald Path because of how dense and, well, green the trees were. I paused. My finger hovered over the map. I knew it was green. The map showed deep, rich patches of it, faded with age, but still discernible. But the word, green, it felt distant, like an echo in a large, empty hall. It wasn't there. Not really.
I knew the color, saw the color, but the descriptor had evaporated. My heart gave a little skip. No, this can't be happening again. Not now. Not when I was finally feeling a tiny bit grounded with Jake here. "What's wrong?" Jake asked, noticing my sudden stillness. "It's just," I struggled, "the color of the forest. I can't think of its name. The trees, this color." I tapped the map frantically. "I know what it is. I paint with it every day. But the word." Jake leaned in, looking at the faded areas. "Green?" he offered, his voice gentle. Green. Yes, that was it. But hearing him say it didn't feel like a relief. It felt like a confirmation of a deeper wrongness. The word had been right there, on the tip of my tongue, but locked away. My mind was playing tricks again, or something else was. The library's warm, yellow light seemed to press down on the map, making the remaining patches of deeply faded green areas on the map look almost gray now, like old charcoal smudges. "Yeah, green," I mumbled, trying to sound casual, but my voice was thin. It just slipped my mind for a second. I wanted to tell him everything about this tiny, awful anomaly. Am I going crazy? This is awful. The thought clawed at my mind, sharp and raw. I needed to say it out loud. His eyes met mine, a flicker of concern. Then, nearby, at a table cluttered with textbooks, a group of high school students had been loudly chatting. Suddenly, they fell silent. The air crackled. One boy, no older than 15, with a shock of unruly brown hair, turned his head slowly. His eyes, usually bright with teenage mischief, were now fixed on me. They held a strange, unsettling intensity. A cold shiver ran down my spine. He leaned in to his friend, but his voice carried, loud and clear in the sudden stillness of the library. "Someone here is making me feel scared. They keep thinking something awful in their head." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. He heard me. He heard my thoughts. Or what if it was making him say that? Making him hear my fear? I snatched my hand away from the map, my cheeks burning. I quickly turned my back to them, my ears ringing with the sound of my own blood pumping. I felt utterly exposed, as if every single awful, terrified thought I had was being broadcast. Jake probably didn't hear it, or at least he didn't react. He was still studying the map, trying to be helpful. I forced myself to breathe. This was just another trick, one more little poke. I pushed the feeling down, a knot forming in my stomach. Just focus. Find something, anything. We continued our search, poring over old microfiches and forgotten town ledgers. Jake, bless his patience, seemed to be taking all my increasingly fragmented stories in stride. His focus on the actual physical clues provided a much-needed anchor. He was looking for anomalies too, but in records, in dates, in reported events that might not align. Later, we decided to grab some food. Walked down to their favorite small diner, the Daily Grind, a greasy spoon joint that hadn't changed in 50 years. Jake offered to order for both of us, giving me a moment to sit down, process, and try to stop the shaking that still hadn't quite left me since the radio message. He returned to the table, 2 steaming mugs of coffee and plates laden with sandwiches in hand.
He smiled at me, a warm, reassuring smile. "Here you go, Sarah. Thought you could use some comfort food." His voice was perfect. His smile was almost perfect. But there was a beat, just a fraction of a second too long, where the muscles in his face seemed to catch up to the expression. Like a hiccup. He picked up his water glass, took a sip, and his eyes, they blinked slower than normal. A full, drawn-out blink that held for just a hair too long. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "Hey," I started, trying a casual tone, "about that old mill record we just found, the one with the missing dates. Do you think it overlaps with anything in the council's archives?" He answered fluently. "It's possible. I cross-referenced the property ID, and there's a gap there. It links up to some unindexed files they had in the back storage, remember? The ones Mrs. Dubois almost threw out last year." He went on, a steady stream of logical, perfectly correct information, but his eyes weren't looking at me.
They were fixed on the empty space just behind my left shoulder, almost as if he was talking to someone else or reading from a mental script. A chill snaked up my spine. This wasn't right. It felt off. I decided to test it. "Hey, remember that time," I said, a deliberate softness in my voice, "when we were kids and you tried to convince me the squirrels in Miller's Bend could talk?" It was an old, silly inside joke, one he always responded to with a specific, fond laugh. He laughed, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze remained fixed behind me. "Oh, yeah," he said, using the exact same tone he'd used 6 months ago when I'd first told him the story again. "Crazy stuff. Kids say the darndest things, right?" He even ended with the same little shrug. Not a single nuance of emotion, just a playback loop. My hands began to tremble. This wasn't Jake, not really. The face was his, the voice was his, but it was a performance, a carefully constructed facade. The person sitting across from me was an imitation. "Jake," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "what are you doing?" He blinked, slowly. His eyes finally shifted to mine, but they held no recognition, no spark of the old camaraderie. They were like deep, still pools. "Just eating, Sarah," he said, and for the first time his voice held a hint of annoyance. "You look tired. Maybe you should eat something." I pushed my plate away. The food, which moments ago had seemed like a small comfort, now looked alien, repulsive. I wanted to scream, to run, to shatter the illusion. But I just sat there, frozen, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. This wasn't merely manipulation of memory or perception. This was something wearing Jake's skin, or at least wearing his responses. I need to go," I stammered, scrambling to my feet. "What?" His brow furrowed again, that perfect, slightly delayed expression. "We just got here." I need some air." I didn't wait for a response, just fled out of the diner, leaving him sitting there, an empty, hollow replica of the man who was supposed to be my anchor. I found myself on the street, blinking against the harsh afternoon sun. Fear, boiling anger. I felt it all, a volatile cocktail churning in my gut.
What was this thing? How deep did it go? Was there any place safe? Any person real? The streets of Maple Creek, once so familiar, seemed to stretch out, each building a watchful eye, each shadow a lurking threat. I got into my car, desperate for the false sense of security its metal shell provided. I started the engine, threw it into drive, and just drove, aimlessly again. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles were white. The silence was too much. I needed noise, distraction. I punched the radio button. A local sports show. A commentator, his voice raspy and enthusiastic, was talking about the upcoming high school baseball game. And the Maple Creek Falcons are looking strong this season, especially with young Billy Jenkins on the mound. He's got an arm like a cannonball, folks. Suddenly, his voice glitched. It cracked, distorted, becoming tinny and robotic. Static sizzled, then a low, humming drone. And then a different voice. Flat, mechanical, but laced with something cold and ancient. You are disturbing the frequency. The resistance only makes things harder. Accept it. I slammed my fist on the radio hard. It sputtered, then went dead. The silence that followed was suffocating. My skin tingled as if millions of tiny insects were crawling over me. A persistent hum began in my ears, a low, unnerving throb deep inside my head. Was I imagining that too? Everything? This? The diner? The library? Was I finally, utterly cracking? I glanced into the rearview mirror. A car, a dark sedan I didn't recognize, had been following me a few car lengths behind me for a while. The headlights were on, even though it was bright daylight, and they began to flash. On, off, quickly, deliberately. Not erratically, but with a chilling rhythm, like a signal, or a warning. Again and again. On, off, on, off. My breath hitched. They saw me. It saw me. It wasn't just in my head. It was out here, on the road, watching. I sped up, my tires squealing as I rounded a corner. The sedan was still there, its lights still flashing in my rear view, a relentless pursuit. I drove faster, my heart pounding, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I needed to get away, anywhere, just away.
After what felt like an eternity, I finally lost the sedan somewhere on the outskirts of town, weaving through residential streets and back alleys I barely remembered. I didn't return to the diner. I didn't try to go back to the library. There was only one other place I could think of: my house. My empty, once safe house, which was now a museum of horrors. But it was my horror. A place to confront it, perhaps, if anything could be confronted anymore. I pulled up my driveway, a fresh layer of gravel spitting from under the tires. The house looked normal now, bathed in the late afternoon sun. A cruel, mocking normalcy. I got out of the car, my legs stiff and unsteady. And then I saw him, Jake, standing on my porch, his face etched with worry. "Sarah," he said, his voice husky, relieved. "Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere. I was scared for you."
He took a step towards me, then stopped. His eyes fell, not on me, but on my hand, my right hand. I looked down. I was holding a key, my house key, my familiar silver key, with that distinctive deep gouge near the head from when John had tried to jimmy open a stubborn lock years ago. But wait, no, it wasn't silver. It was bronze. A dull, ancient-looking bronze, glistening as if newly polished, but clearly old, impossibly old. And on its flat head, where the smooth metal should have been, there was a strange, intricate symbol, something I had never, ever seen before. A twisting, angular glyph that seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. I stared at it, utterly bewildered. This wasn't my key. Where had I gotten this? My mind raced, trying to recall picking it up, but there was nothing, just this unfamiliar, terrifying object in my hand. I tried to grip it, to squeeze it, to confirm it was real. But as my fingers tightened, the metal felt soft, like warm wax, molding under my touch. My stomach lurched. I couldn't hold on to it. It was wrong, all wrong. I opened my hand, letting it fall. It dropped with a dry, stony clack on the wooden porch floor. Not the metallic jingle of keys, but the sound of rock on wood. And as it hit, it shimmered. The bronze faded, the strange symbol vanished, the ancient shape streamlined. In an instant, it transformed. It was my key again, my silver key, solid, cold metal. The distinctive gouge, unmistakable, was back. Jake stared at it, then at me. His expression, moments ago filled with worry, now shifted. A slow, chilling doubt began to cloud his eyes. He took a subtle step back, placing a little more distance between us. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat, edged with a newfound wariness. "Are you okay? That key, what was that?" He looked at me, then at the key on the ground, then back at me. My key, my normal key now, nothing unusual, nothing strange, just ordinary. I looked at him, desperately, then down at the key, then back at him. My anchor, my lifeline. He was looking at me like everyone else, like I was losing my mind. The entity had done it. It had targeted him. It was turning him too. Who or what was I supposed to believe? My eyes screamed the truth. My memories insisted on it. But everything else, every single piece of external reality had warped. I could see the truth, but no one else would. And now, the one person who saw a glimmer of it was starting to look the other way. I felt a cold, crushing despair settle over me. I had to find answers, fast, before I lost him too, before I lost myself entirely. My mind, still reeling from the key's transformation, desperately latched on to the records we had found in the library. The ones about Maple Creek's forgotten history. The Autumn Festival, a vague reference to whispers and disappearances from a long, long time ago. It was a thread, a fragile, desperate thread in this unraveling tapestry of my world. Jake and I spent what little light remained that day, and much of the night, in his apartment, which felt marginally safer, simply because it wasn't my contaminated house. We spread out the maps, the old photos, the scribbled notes from the library on his living room floor, a desperate attempt to create order from the chaos, to find a pattern, a meaning. Our coffee cups sat forgotten, cold, next to piles of faded news clippings and brittle manuscripts. I pointed to a detail on an old town census. "Look," I said, my voice hoarse from hours of talking. "These names, They're all from the same street, Elmwood Lane.
And they all disappeared around the same time, the autumn of 1888. It also mentions a community-wide forgetfulness after. Jake leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. The raw doubt from the porch was still in his eyes, a low, simmering ember. But he was trying. He was still trying. It was enough, for now. He picked up a sepia-toned photograph, an image of an old town festival, probably taken sometime in the late 1800s. People dressed in quaint, stiff clothes, smiling, posing. A carnival atmosphere, with children chasing each other and banners fluttering in the wind. He held it up, his gaze intense. "Sarah," he said, his voice dropping, heavy with a new discovery. "Your eyes in this photo, they're different." I looked at the photo I was holding. A picture of me, much younger, maybe 5 or 6, at a similar festival with my parents. My eyes, even then, were bright, full of childish mischief. Then I looked at the photo in Jake's hand. He was pointing to a small girl in the foreground, tucked behind a pillar, almost invisible. A girl who looked uncannily like me at that age. My heart pounded. But the eyes, my eyes, in that photo, they weren't bright. They weren't mischievous. They were black, utterly, completely black. Empty, like 2 holes punched in a sheet. A blank, vacant stare. The very essence of childhood innocence, stolen and replaced by a void. Panic clawed at my throat. It wasn't me. It couldn't be me. "No," I gasped. "That's not me. It's not." "Sarah, look," he insisted, his voice now laced with fear. "The dress, the ribbons in her hair. It's exactly what your mom said you wore to the Harvest Jamboree that year. The picture on the mantel at your place, it's almost identical." I snatched the photo from his hand. The paper felt cold, almost wet to the touch. The tiny black eyes stared up at me, accusing. I didn't question how Jake knew what I wore, or how that mantelpiece photo fit. I just reacted. I threw it down, hard. As the old photo hit the wooden floor, the world around us seemed to contort. The maps, the photos, the scattered notes, they didn't just lie there. They crawled. They stretched and contracted on the floorboards like living skin. They began to pull themselves into a perfect, menacing circle around Jake and me, trapping us. The single overhead light in the living room flickered wildly. Each flicker warped the room further. Faces in the old photographs elongated, their features smearing like wet paint. The neat lines of our handwritten notes bled, the ink oozing across the paper like fresh blood. The intricate map of Maple Creek spread at our feet pulsed. And then, slowly, sickeningly, a giant, unblinking eye began to form in its very center, a dark iris expanding over the town square. A low, guttural humming vibrated deep within my skull, mirroring the thrumming in my ears. A cloying, damp earth smell, heavy and putrid, bloomed in the air, despite all the windows being closed. It felt like the ground itself was breathing. "What the hell?" Jake screamed, his voice raw with terror. He lunged, trying to break free from the invisible ring forming around us.
but an unseen force slammed him back, hard, throwing him on the floor beside me. The room began to spin. Not just the floor, but the walls, the ceiling, everything. We were being sucked into a vortex, a sickening carousel of distorted images and horrifying sounds. My stomach churned. This was it. This was the entity, and it had found us. The chaos subsided as abruptly as it began. We lay there, Jake and I, sprawled on the wooden floor, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling uncontrollably. The room was still, normal. The maps and photos were scattered haphazardly again, not in a circle. The light was steady. The stench of damp earth had vanished, replaced by the faint, familiar scent of Jake's old books. Jake stood slowly, his movements stiff, his eyes wide and glazed with fear. He looked at me, and that chilling doubt, which had almost been eclipsed by terror, returned. But now it was colder, mingled with something else, something dark. He walked mechanically towards an antique bookshelf that ran along the far wall. His fingers, almost without thought, extracted a thin, leather-bound volume. It looked old, too old. "I found this," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "in your room, when I went to check on you. Where did you hide it?" He handed it to me. My old diary.
The cover, once a rich, deep blue, was now faded, almost black. It felt heavy in my hands, a ghost. I opened it, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Flipping through the pages, I saw my own childlike scrawl, my innocent thoughts, my dreams of becoming an artist. And then, the last page, a drawing of John, his laughing face painstakingly rendered in crayon. And all around it, my familiar handwriting, little notes, memories of us. But there, stark against the faded paper, beneath John's drawing, was a line of text. Not my handwriting. The strokes were jagged, angular, aggressive. And the ink, it was a searing, bloody red. It read, "Sarah killed him. She laughed when he fell." The words seared into my brain. My memory of John's death, already fractured, warped again. A new image, horrifying and insidious, tried to force its way in. Me, standing over him, laughing. No, it wasn't true. It couldn't be true. I stared at the sentence, my eyes fixed on the bloody red ink, trying to deny it, trying to scream a protest that died in my throat. Jake was looking at me, his eyes. They were no longer wide with terror. They were hard, cold, and then unmistakable, full of a deep, unshakable accusation. The seed had been planted. The doubt had taken root. "I think," he said, his voice quiet, deadly, "you need to explain, Sarah. The horror wasn't the monster that warped reality or hunted me down. It was the face of the only person I trusted, now cold, now broken. The entity hadn't just changed physical reality. It had poisoned the very soul of my last ally. And it had done so using my own hand, my own history, twisted against me. The world had shifted on its axis. No, not the world, just mine. Jake, the one steady point in the spinning chaos, had looked at me with those eyes. Not his eyes, not truly. They held something borrowed, something cold and accusing. The diary, the red words, a blade twisting in a wound I didn't even know I had. He thought I killed John. That I laughed. I couldn't answer, couldn't speak. My throat was cement. I just stumbled back, away from him, away from the poison that had seeped into his gaze. My legs moved on their own, a panicked flight. I remember the rush of cold air as I burst out of his apartment door, the loud slam that probably echoed through the quiet building. I didn't look back, couldn't. I just ran. Down the stairs, out into the night, the streets of Maple Creek blurring into dark smears. I didn't know where I was going. My car was still at his place. I just walked, the wind biting at my exposed skin. I pulled my arms tight around myself, shaking. What little strength I had left, what little fight, it had all drained out, leaving me hollowed. It had gotten to Jake. It had shown him a meticulously crafted lie, using my own childhood diary, my own hand, but not my words. The clever, malicious bastard. I found myself back at my apartment somehow, my movements robotic, the familiar door, the familiar lock clicking. Another safe space contaminated. Was any place truly safe? Was any person truly real? I walked straight to the bathroom, flipped on the harsh overhead light, looked into the mirror. My face stared back, gaunt, eyes rimmed red, wild. I looked like a stranger. I tried to focus, to find something of Sarah, the person I used to be, the artist, the one who loved John. I blinked. My reflection blinked too, but there was a delay, a tiny, almost imperceptible lag, a third of a second maybe, just enough to be wrong, like an echo in time. I blinked again, slower this time. 1, 2, 3, and then her eyelids fluttered down. I lifted my right hand, held it up to the mirror. My reflection lifted its hand. I leaned closer, searching for the tiny smudge of dried paint on my index finger, a relic from a frantic sketch I'd done hours ago. My reflection's finger was clean, spotless. No, no, not again. I pressed my palm against the cold glass. The reflection's hand pressed back, but I felt nothing. No warmth, no solidness beneath my fingers. Just the cold plane. I slowly lowered my hand. The reflection hesitated, then dropped its hand too. It wasn't me. Not completely. Not anymore. I was breaking, and the thing staring back from the glass wasn't quite me. It was a projection, a copy, a broken copy. I spent the rest of the night curled on my sofa, fully dressed, shivering, listening to the silence.